Well, welcome everyone back to In the Kitchen. I'm Weston, super excited to be joining Tom again. Good to see you again, Tom.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, hold on. I was testing out the Zoom. So yeah, today we'll be talking about development, pitching development for all ages. So anywhere from, your kindergartner up to, maybe a major leaguer. And so, Tom, I was thinking we could start today with just going over youth. And then we can kind of work our way up as we go, as we answer questions and talk about this. So if you're in the call right now, feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to get to them. And let's get started. So Tom, if we're talking about youth pitching development, what do you think what does that kind of look like? What does a day of practice or training kind of look like for a youth kid?
Yeah, it's a great setup for this get together. I get asked wherever I go in the country, what is too soon to start a kid pitching or hitting? It's never too soon. You just have to make sure that you manage your expectations and realize with youth sports across the board, male or female, you're talking about neurological development, not strength, not skill. And if you try to get more out of a youngster in your day-to-day workouts or your weeks or your season, you're probably gonna either end up burning the kid out and or getting him or her hurt. So think of youth sports, particularly baseball, as nervous system. Your first window of trainability is when the first time they swing a plastic bat or throw a wiffle ball. And obviously, if you're a parent, you see your child as a future Nolan Ryan or whoever.
Of course.
And just the play is the most important. Don't make it competitive. Have them have fun, and realize that they're going to have to turn their nervous system on first, and they can't be bored at a practice. So there's as much pressure on a parent or a coach to create a workout situation, a practice situation, and a game situation, whether it's coach pitch, hit off the tee, whether it's pitching to each other, where it's fun first. That's huge in the pre testosterone, pre-teens. You got to have fun first. And it's got to be educational, and expectations should be on the process, not the outcome. And you and I talked off camera. One of the biggest issues we have in our parenting, coaching, sports environment is everybody is outcome oriented. And it's nice if you have good outcomes, but it's the process that's important. And I'll reinforce, it's got to be fun. It's a learning experience. You can't, there's always going to be a couple kids that are really good. I know you're a hockey guy, but I'll guarantee you from early on, you were one of the better athletes on every team that you played on. Well, a lot of kids are late bloomers. In fact, for the people that are listening to us today, most Hall of Famers in all sports were late bloomers. So when you're dealing with youth sports, fun first, structured practices that are process-based and not results or outcome-based. And then you've got a chance to have kids play, be healthy, and stay with the game. Did that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. I think, you talking about how important play is, when I was a little kid, I don't remember really any practices that I had. And what I do remember though was playing wiffle ball against my brother in the backyard. And that was when I learned how to hit. That was when I learned how to hit a curveball. It's when I learned how to pitch, field. That was the environment that I remember and kind of thrived and feel like I grew in,
And you're setting this discussion up perfectly. There's types of training. There's block training, there's random training, and there's deep training. Block training is when a coach or a parent sets up a workout and really monitors what the kids are working on. Random training is when the kids are playing like in Sandlot, where they're doing skill work and a little bit of competition, but not with the supervision that block training does. And then what you brought up about you and your brother, my brother and I were similar. It's called deep training. And that's my brother and I wore out 2 garage doors in the time that we were together when we were kids, throwing tennis balls. You have a broomstick or whatever trying to hit the tennis ball, wiffle balls in the background. And you will learn more in that deep training where you're just hanging out with your brother or a buddy and getting huge reps. And those movements, when you're doing it by yourself, will set the stage for everything that takes place after that with the learning situation with a coach and a team in a competitive environment.
That's awesome. And you bring up the competitive environment. I think the natural competitive nature that I have now kind of stems from those games when I was a little kid. And to the observer, it was just a couple kids playing wiffle ball, but to us, it was the World Series. And
oh yeah,
how do you, as a coach or a parent to a kid, how do you try to kind of balance the kind of learning the game versus kind of balancing adding competition and like getting that stimulus, getting them exposed to that environment?
This is hugely important, and it's easier for you to remember when you're 4 or 5 years old than it is for me. But a 4 or 5-year-old can imagine anything. You ask a 4-year-old what he wants to be when he grows up, and he might tell you he wants to be a fire truck. I want to be a fire truck. Well, we all know he can't be a fire truck, but he can imagine anything.
Yeah.
You ask a 45-year-old athlete that's winding his career down, and his imagination might say, I just like to be competitive for 2 more seasons or whatever. So as you go through the various stages of development, your imagination is kind of tailored to fit the risk and uncertainty and the successes and failures that you go through. The one thing I've been able to see is even your Hall of Famers, most of your elite athletes are just grown up 12-year-olds. They never lose the joy of the game. They still get excited as much with practice as they do real game conditions. And the competitive instincts that they have is not so much to be the best on a travel ball team, so you can sign for $1 billion, whatever it is. It's to be competitive with your buddies, and the pizza always tastes better when you win than when you lose. But kids also have to learn that losing doesn't define them. This is huge. If you can reinforce, if you happen to be the parent of or a coach of a group of kids, youth, make them realize that it is awesome to win, but you will learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And the key to the whole thing is to ask yourself why. If you have a bad day, you don't judge yourself on the bad day, you ask yourself why. And there should be, if you're a coach or a parent, you should have a fix for anything that can go wrong in a baseball uniform or a softball uniform or whatever sport you're playing. And if your kids can understand it's okay to screw up, it's not okay to screw up the same way every time, and that you will learn more from your screw ups or your failures than you will your successes. We actually say, wherever I can, we want to fail fast forward. The athletes that we're watching on TV have actually screwed up more than any of the people that are watching TV. And they're playing because they weren't afraid or their failures didn't hold them back. They moved forward. So to put a little ribbon around what we did, you've got to have structure when you're teaching. But it's got to be fun. And it's got to be an instruction environment where when they do something right or wrong, they know why. And you're not judging them on their outcome, you're judging them on their process. And if they do that, then kids they'll be teenagers even when they're 40 years old. never want to burn up the joy of sport. And you have it, you're battling away, you do other things, but you're still plugging away with a dream of playing in the big league someday. You should never lose that.
Amen to that. It's a good point of like, teaching kids how to, deal with failure early. I think as I've started to, train some younger kids and stuff like that, it's interesting because you can tell what kids have been exposed to that. But I think sometimes there's kids that aren't exposed to failure. They've been told that they're great, they're told they're perfect. They're always put in a situation where they're winning. How do you this might be kind of a difficult question, but how do you introduce failure to those kids when they've been told that they're winners all the time and they don't respond well to failure? How do you reframe that for them?
Unfortunately, in today's world, with really good intentions, both parents and coaches, they don't like to see their kids fail. It tears them up. It bothered me when I saw my son. My son was a really good baseball player, but his first love was, surfing, snowboarding, and skateboard. But in baseball, which I knew about, when he would screw up, it would tear my heart out to watch him miss a fly ball or give up a home run. And it was almost, you would almost do anything to keep that feeling from happening to them. But like my mom used to say, if it doesn't kill you, it's a good experience. And the more adversity you face, the better you're going to be prepared to deal with it as you go through the competitive environment that we call whatever sport you're playing in. So in today's world, parents especially, and you can't blame it on a mom or a dad, it's parents in general, really don't want their kids to experience the frustration and the hurt that goes with failure. But you just have to kind of trust what we're telling you. The more they screw up, the faster they're going to learn. And it's the kids who are afraid to fail that never put themselves out there enough to be able to get better at what they do. If you're a child or you're promoting, play just hard enough that you don't screw up, then that kid will probably never play at a higher level and never get the joy out of the game. And can I talk about something else that's important?
Absolutely.
When you're on a team of kids, young adults or old professionals, the team chemistry is the heart beats as one. When someone on your team has a bad day, one of the things that team play as a youth teaches you is empathy. You feel bad for your teammate.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, when you know your teammate isn't giving what he should, there's nothing wrong with going up and saying, hey, time out. We don't do it that way. Mm-hmm. So think of it as structured sandlot. You probably are too young to even know what sandlot baseball is. But there's I lived on 112th Street in a neighborhood where it was 111th, 112th, and 113th. And there was like 11 guys and 3 gals that we played all the sports together. And if you weren't very good, you played right field until you got good enough to get to the infield and pitch. And nobody judged anything. You just played. And mm-hmm. we had fights. Somebody would take their bat and go home, but half an hour later, you're back out playing again. Mm-hmm. So it teaches you all kinds of social interactions that you wouldn't get if you're just on the computer in a screen and having the screen teach and provide all your entertainment. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that the people that are listening today, the power of play and what they learn, good, bad, and indifferent, will help them as they combine their human intelligence with their artificial intelligence. And that comes out the other end better for the experience. So moms, don't be afraid to let your sons or your daughters mess up. On the drive home, kind of wait until conversation starts to come along. And then you ask, you gave up a base hit to lose the game. Why? What would you do next time? And help everything be a learning experience. And it's okay to take them out for pizza, even when they've lost, as long as they've busted their butts to be the best they can be on that given day.
No, it's a great answer. And from a coaching standpoint, through the lens of pitching, what types of, obviously it's about play, right? We're prioritizing play, but you have practices and stuff like that outside of the games. What types of kind of foundations do you aim to set with, a kid, from maybe routine foundations to mechanical foundations to maybe just understanding how pitching works? What types of like groundwork do you want to try to establish with a kid when they start to pitch?
Again, you set me up really well to answer this question. When you are in charge of a practice plan, whether you're a pitching coach, a hitting coach, or the head coach, and you're putting a practice together, you have to understand that the athletes on your team show up with X amount of motivation, whether they're little leaguers or big leaguers.
Mhm.
They're going to show up with X amount of motivation, and you're not going to get any more. You can't motivate them any more than what they show up with, but you can demotivate them. And that's what you have to be careful of. So when you're structuring your practices, we'll just use as a pitching coach, you need to tell them, this is what we're going to get done today. We're going to do our block training. We're going to do these 4 drills. You're going to have 10 minutes of what we call a touch bullpen. And then you're going to do some aerobic, anaerobic work, run, and we'll call it a day. And we're going to be on the field doing those drills and those skill acquisition things for 90 minutes. If you give a kid what he's going to do and the time frame he's going to do it in, he can give you 100% effort. I'd like everybody to think back. Have you ever had a coach or a parent tell you, give me your best effort? Well, a kid can't give you his best effort if he doesn't know how long he's going to work. And one of the big problems we have as parents and coaches, we don't give them the structure of the workout and or the time that you're going to be workout. So they'll hold back and they'll actually get demotivated because when's this guy going to stop talking? I have a tendency to talk too much. So I have to remind myself before every practice, even when I'm working with you guys, that I'm going to tell them what we're going to do. I'm going to give them the time frame they're going to do it, and then I'm going to turn them loose to get it done. And then you just go around and check the boxes. So just to review, as a parent or a coach, they're going to be motivated to get there. And you have to make sure you give them a time frame and what they're going to do in that time frame, and ask them to give them maximum effort for that whole period. And then you've done your job. And it boils down to the way you practice is the way you're going to compete. And we've added a new piece. I believe we started it about this time last year. Not only are you going to think yourself through a practice, you're going to add the feeling to it. So if you're getting ready to throw a curveball, not only are you going to visualize all the things that are involved with a mechanically perfect curveball, you're going to add in the feeling of that perfect curveball. And if you see it and you feel it, which is a visualize and internalize, now when you go in the game, you've already got 2/3 of the stuff figured out. Then you just have to do it. Did that make sense? So I would ask everybody to give it a try. I think with our upcoming app improvements and whatever, we're going to ask our kids in Mustard to not only just visualize and look at their report card, but feel when they're looking at the report card what that perfect fastball looks like and feels like. And again, that will give you see it, feel it, do it. It'll do everything but to do it. And then you take that between the lines. And if you practice that way, then you're going to perform that way. If that makes any sense. And that's what the big boys do. That's what the superstars of today and the superstars of yesterday, they may not have known exactly what we're talking about right now, but they did a variation on that theme their whole career.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Do you think, you talk about, thinking about what it looks like and what it feels like. Do you think it's valuable to have people, put that on paper or, record themselves saying it, like just to have like record of what it feels like or what it looks like, that type of stuff?
Okay, this is good. I'm gonna put you on the spot here. We learn three ways. We learn by hearing, by seeing, and by feeling. And most kids learn best by seeing, followed closely by feeling. Very few athletes, very few students in a regular school learn best by listening. Now, you're blessed because working with you can remember what was said probably better than any of the peer groups that you've been hanging out with me with. So you have to figure out what kind of a learner your athlete is. And then here's where it gets tough. You have to look at yourself in the mirror as a coach or a parent. What kind of a teacher are you? What kind of a coach are you?
Mhm.
And here's my challenge. If you mix in don't in any of your vocabulary, you have to reframe that.
Mhm.
Don't hang this curveball. Don't do this. The kid himself, when he says don't hang a curveball, his subconscious brain doesn't get the don't or the do. It's just going to hang the curveball. And one of the biggest issues that we run across from parenting and coaching, where they really, really want to help, there's too much don't do coaching and parenting involved.
Mm. Mhm.
And if you could just frame it, it's better to ask questions than it is to make a statement. And I'm going to put you on the spot. Why, like, what am I doing right now? I'm asking you a question. When I ask you a question, what does it force you to do?
I have to think.
Yeah, you have to give me an answer
Yeah.
that comes from you.
Hmm.
If I give you a, don't you dare sit there and not say anything.
Hmm.
What did I do? When I say, what did I just say? And it forces a response. I can't make you do it. It's called the
Right.
Socratic method. If you'll ask your kids or your athletes, ask them a question, it improves the communication process and it tells you what kind of a coach you are and how good they are at listening to what you're saying.
Right.
And the goal is to ask as many questions until the learning curve at least has a positive stint to it. And unfortunately, what we do is we assume just because we've told a kid how to do something, that he understands it and is going to do it. And I would ask anybody that's listening to us talk right now, how many times have you heard someone talk and say, well, okay, well, I'll figure it out later? Or how many times have you been sitting in a classroom where the teacher's been talking for 20 minutes and you can't remember anything she said? Or how many times have you been reading a book or a manual that a coach gave you? And after 3 pages, you can't remember anything in the 3 pages that you just read. That is the typical youth or teenage brain at work. And you have to learn how to structure and learn from that around their attention span. And if it's fun, it's a lot easier learning experience than if it's not fun.
Great. From a mechanics standpoint for a pitcher, like a youth kid, or maybe it's not even mechanics, but what would you say are probably like three things that you emphasize teaching a kid to be able to understand in terms of like the important things to be able to do well in a pitching delivery?
Okay, this is really good. What you're asking is what are the cliff notes that you give a kid when you have limited time and you want to get the information across? And as luck would have it, you've heard this a million times from me. Our basic mustard report card boils down to GFF, go friggin' fast,
Hmm.
keep your eyes level, keep your glove in front of you, and drag your back foot when you throw. That is everything an 8-year-old needs to hear. Go as fast as you can, keep your eyes level, keep
Hmm.
your glove in front of you, and drag your back foot when you're throwing. That is literally timing and sequencing. Basically, balance and posture, thrust and lift, right down to those
Yeah.
points. And that's simple to teach. The kids get that.
Right. No, I think that's a great way to think about it too, because it's external things. You're not giving them internal cues about hip positioning or arm timing. It's it's go fast. They can understand, go fast,
Yeah.
drag your foot. Like that's just something that you do and keep your eye,
Exactly.
like it's it's a lot easier for them to understand. And yeah, as you're talking about those 4 things, I'm doing my calculations and looking at the report card and being like, okay, like, yeah, the dragging my foot helps me stay balanced and my
Yeah.
eyes level helps me stay balanced and going fast helps my timing and my stride length and lift and thrust. And it really does kind of address all of it. So no,
Yeah,
that's a,
and you can give them all those things after they've been around it and listened to it. But
mhm,
I wouldn't challenge a 12-year-old the same way I would challenge a 22-year-old AAA player.
right.
So you have to adjust around your style as a parent or a coach, around the way your athlete or your child learns, and put the two together in a situation where they have some fun and they are learning on the spot. And you can't learn 4 things in a day.
Right.
If everybody, even the athletes, could understand, if you just learn one new thing every time you go to the ballpark, at the end of the year, you're going to be way better than at the start of the year. And can I take a little sidebar real quick here?
Mhm.
We're just talking about mechanics right now. But remember, there's mechanics, there's functional strength, there's nutrition and sleep for recovery, and then there's the mental emotional that goes with learning how to deal with failure in a competitive environment. So you just can't teach one of the 4 legs. You've got to kind of have to combine them all. It sounds like a lot, but really it isn't. So, just follow what Mustard is telling you to do on the report card. And then what we're actually providing when it comes to drills for skills and strength training for muscle and nerve balance, and put them all together, you'll be better off than if you're just showing up and rolling the balls out there and hoping that something gets done.
That's a great transition to the next question, which was, how can a youth athlete train for, functional strength? What does that look different for an 8-year-old versus a 38-year-old?
Oh, yeah. And you've been basically a weightlifter most of your well, probably you started when you were a sophomore or junior in high school,
Mhm.
where you hit the weight room. It's okay to deal with weights to build strength, but not as a pre-adolescent. If testosterone hasn't showed up or estrogen hasn't showed up in your body, there's no compelling reason to lift heavy weight. You can do your own body weight, and body weight is push-ups, chin-ups, sit-ups, planks, where you can work as hard as you want. You're not going to build bulk, but you're not going to put yourself in muscle failure. When you get tired doing push-ups, you can't do a push-up. When you get tired on a bench press with body weight or more on the barbell, you can actually push yourself and get yourself hurt. So I would suggest pre-testosterone, pre-hormones, that the only thing you really work to build strength with is your body weight.
Mhm.
You can do light dumbbells, you can do elastic resistance, but those are endurance builders. That's for joint integrity. It's not for muscle prime movers. When you get to high school and you literally are testosterone is showing up, then within tolerance, you can add in heavier lifts that are baseball specific. And I don't want to go too deep into this, but you have to be careful about lifting for absolute strength. Because absolute strength is not going to allow you to throw harder. It's not going to allow you to swing faster. What it will do is it will build size, which can be of value if you go fast with it. But
Mhm.
you want functional strength. And forgive me for, you've heard this a million times from me. Functional strength means that if you have an imbalance between your accelerators and decelerators, you can only accelerate your arm, but you can decelerate with your arm. There's 3 muscle groups that enable you to throw the ball forward and only 2 muscle groups to decelerate your arm. So by logic and numbers, the back side of your throwing arm has to be worked 1/3 more than the front side. On your legs, 4 muscle groups allow you to run forward fast. 3 muscle groups allow you to decelerate going forward fast. You can't get any faster than your legs can decelerate. So that forces you to, with your legs, you're going to do 1/4 more on the backside of your legs, running backwards, working on your hamstrings, doing things that will build parity between your accelerators and decelerators. Little leaguers, pre-teens don't have to do that. But from teenage until you retire at age, hopefully 45 with $1 billion in the bank, you have to make sure that your accelerators and your decelerators are balanced out.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, we've kind of gone over some mechanical stuff, functional strength, nutrition. We've gone over the kind of mental, emotional side of it too, with parents and kids. From a throwing standpoint, not to go too far into the weeds with programming, but how often do you like kids to be throwing, whether it's in season or off season? But is it 4 days a week? Does it depend? How long should they throw?
Okay.
What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and baseball in general is really starting to pay attention to this now. Dr. Glenn Fleisig, initially with American Sports Medicine Institute, with Dr. Andrews down in Birmingham, he collected data from a whole bunch of us on pitch totals per game, per week. No, let's go this way: per inning, per game, per week, per month, and per season. So they actually have court-tested pitch totals, age-specific. Now, the thought process here is, in today's world, our kids pitch too much and they don't throw enough. If I could recommend, and again, I can't tell you have to do it, I would let your youngsters throw year-round, throw something year-round. It doesn't have to be a baseball every day. It can be a football, it can be a softball, it can be a wiffle ball. But throwing on flat ground is only going to help the long-term endurance of your joints that are involved in throwing. When you get to the mound, you have to be aware that the mound is the only unnatural thing about throwing. You basically are designed to throw rocks at rabbits to eat. But very few people throw rocks at rabbits to eat going down the hill. And it's not that going down the hill doesn't help you throw harder. It's harder to decelerate your arm, because the most ground force, and we're getting pretty deep here, most ground force you can generate on flat ground is 4 times body weight. That's energy available to come up and out into the baseball and the bat. On the mound, going down the hill on the mound, it's 6 times body weight. That helps you accelerate your arm, but human beings aren't designed to throw down the hill when it comes to the decelerating. So if you're going to be on the mound, you have to be careful about muscle failure, especially in the decelerators. And if you follow what Mustard is recommending, you'll get exercises that when you are on the mound, it will literally help you build balance so that you can decelerate without hurting yourself. So again, it's our research, and it's supported by what Dr. Andrews and Glenn Fleisig said. You should throw year-round, but you have to take 2 to 3 months off from the mound work sometime during your year as a baseball pitcher. And it's hard in today's game because of travel ball, these, basically camps where you bring a couple hundred kids together for scouts to see. The winter semester, where if you're in college in a program, in today's game, you're going to lift and throw almost as much in the fall as you do in the spring. Really have to be careful about pitch totals and recovery.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about how it's from the mound to flat ground, how it's about the decelerators, right? It takes more to decelerate. Is that really what the biggest difference is, it doesn't necessarily put more stress on the arm going down the mound to release the ball, but it's the stress to decelerate it
Right.
is where the
It
issue
will
is.
it will actually facilitate the acceleration of your arm. You'll throw harder going
Hmm.
down a hill than you will on flat ground.
Hmm.
You can throw 90 miles an hour on both, but it's easier to throw 90 miles an hour going down the hill than it is on flat ground. So you have to mix and match. And I would strongly recommend you can throw as much as you want as a little leaguer, a high school, a college, or a pro guy on flat ground. But when you start getting to the mound, especially against the hitter, you're going to have to follow those guidelines for the recovery of, and that way you should never actually hurt your arm because of throwing to them.
No, that's awesome. I think we've kind of covered a lot on youth. I do want to go into kind of that next stage, right, of kind of adolescence to
Okay.
high school. Um, you know, what would you say is the biggest difference between how a youth player trains versus a high school player? I know you talked about, testosterone starts coming in, they start lifting weights, but outside of the weight room, is there much of a difference in terms of how they train on the baseball field?
Oh, yeah. And we talked off camera, volume equals load, frequency, intensity, and duration. You prepare to compete, to recover, to repeat. You put those together, and obviously you can challenge a sophomore in high school with more of all the above than you can a 12-year-old little league. Conversely, a 16-year-old high school kid, when he gets to college, can be challenged with more intensity, etc. And eventually, when they get to pro ball, that is the max out. So it's age specific. It is personally adaptive, and it's cross specific to the task that we're looking at. Now, I'm going to bring something up that you and I know about. What happens when you get that 6'4", 205-pound freshman in high school that, oh my God, I've got a future, whoever it might be. You have to be careful, because if that kid if he grows 2 inches in a summer and gains 20 pounds, he's not 14, he's barely 13. So there's chronological age and biological age. And a lot of times, well, I'll just make it really easy for everybody. For every inch you grow or 5 pounds that you gain, it pushes you back 2 months. So if you grow 2 inches, that pushes your biological age back 4 months. If you gain 10 pounds, that pushes you back another 4 months. So you're 8 months, even though you say you're 14 and a half, you're really only 13. So you have to be aware of that. And then for the really tall kids, the research is coming back now. If you're 6'5" or taller at any level of competition, you are 3 years behind a 6-foot kid that has never experienced a huge growth or weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Wow.
why all these really tall guys, the kids don't even know who Randy Johnson is anymore, but Randy didn't put his pieces together till he was 27, 28. And then he was nasty for the next 14 years.
Right.
So be aware as a parent or a coach that having the tallest kid is nice, but that tall kid pays a greater price to pitch than the
Right.
guy that's a little shorter that has never had a growth spurt or a weight gain.
No, it's great that you bring that up, because that was a question that I had, was talking about, puberty and growth and weight gain and how it does impact your biological age, and eventually, it impacts your mechanics.
Yeah.
And it can throw guys out of sync, and most of the time they don't know what happened, right? And
Yeah.
so
And
when that
if
does
you can
happen,
put
how
this,
does
and let me interrupt you real quick.
yeah.
It's arm speed without arm strength that causes the issue. The same with a kid that can really swing a bat. He's got some kind of pop with a bat. But if he can swing the bat with speed more than he's got strength, he's going to break. So you have to be cognizant, be aware that that can happen. And you have to kind of watch pitch totals and or swing totals until it matches up. So if you have that kid, remember when I said load, frequency, intensity, and duration, you can have a 14 or a 15-year-old sophomore, junior in high school that he can get his 100 pitches a week, but he's not going to do it in one outing. He's going to spread it out over 3 or 4 relief outings. Here's a kid that can give you 25 or 30 pitches every other day, but not 100 pitches in one game on one day. And I hope that makes sense logically to everybody that's listening.
No, that makes sense. And if they do get kind of out of sync, what does it look like to, training? Do they adjust? Is there something they do more of to kind of get their brain and their body back in sync? Like, is it doing PNF a lot, or what type of stuff can they do to get back on track?
Here's your indicators that you can help yourself be your own best mechanics coach and condition coach. If you're stiff and sore on the front side of your elbow or the front side of your shoulder, that's usually mechanic. If you're stiff and sore on the back side of your elbow or the back side of your shoulder, that's usually functional strength. And that will tell you what you need to work on. So you go to Mustard, there's lots of good information out there on drills for skill and drills for strength that you match up and to keep yourself healthy that way.
Awesome.
Let me take that a step further. When you're watching a kid in a game, if he's missing high and low consistency, that's a front side issue. That's a glove issue with our swivel and stabilize. If he's missing right or left, it's a posture issue. For every 1 inch of inappropriate head movement, it costs you 2 inches of release point. So kids that are missing right or left are usually having trouble with their torso and their head being firm and stable with eyes level. So high and low is glove, right and left is head.
No, that's a great way to put it. I had something and then I lost it, but
that's when I say, tell me what I just said.
Tell me what I just said.
Yeah,
that's my favorite. I use it with kids I train now anyways, just because I think it tests to see if they're listening. 2, it helps me remember if I forgot.
Yeah.
But 3, you can kind of see how they conceptualize it too.
Exactly.
They usually repeat it differently.
So you were talking about how do you recognize when you're looking at how do you recognize that there's a problem? So go ahead.
Yeah. It actually was about talking about the recovery blocks. When you talk about going into Mustard, you have the recovery blocks of, light dumbbells or resistance bands, PNF, medicine ball stuff. How often a week do you like to do? Is it something where you could do the dumbbells Monday and then the bands Tuesday and PNF Wednesday and just kind of do that every day, or is that too much?
Perfect. And this is part of our initial statement where you have to have a practice plan that is predictable, functional, with a time constraint that will actually help the kid. So the things you can use to put energy back into your arm, and you've been around me, that it's basically the 4th level of that pyramid.
Yep.
What you take out of your arm in pitch totals on a weekly basis, you have to put back in with light dumbbells, elastic cord, plyo balls, weighted bats. And those are all joint integrity builders that you can do every day, all right, to your level of tolerance. And as long as with the weights that you're moving around, you're putting as much energy back into your arm as you took out, you should never have issues with your shoulder or your elbow. And the formulas are all there for you. Mustard does them. The companies I work with Tom House Sports and the NPA and 3D-QB, you can do it with football too. You can tell if a route tree requires 60 passes, a 15-ounce football thrown on an average of 40 miles an hour. You take X amount out of your arm, you put it back in, and you do it week to week. And what you take out, you put back in. When I was like coaching at USC as a pitching coach, we traveled. We went on the road with elastic resistance because it was easier to carry through security and life. When we were home is when we did the dumbbells and the heavier stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But joint integrity is not weight training for strength. It's for the integrity of the arm and the shoulder and the elbow. Okay.
No, that's great. I think you brought up a good topic, especially when we start to talk about high school and maybe even getting into college of, the plyo balls and the weighted balls. When do you start to introduce, overload and underload throwing? How at what boxes should they check before they get into weighted balls? Should they do holds first before they start doing weighted balls? What's kind of the window of trainability that makes
Basically,
it right?
all of the above. And remember, we're able to look at chronological age versus biological age. So we pay attention to biological age, and that will allow us to decide whether this 6'4" kid that weighs 102 pounds, he's not going to be someone that you're going to put in the weight room. He's going to have to work on joint integrity and body weight, or he's going to break in his joints. Growth plate stuff. If you ever have a kid that has growth plate issues, it's medial epicondylitis in the elbow, it's loose shoulder in the shoulder, it's Osgood's slaughter
Oh yeah.
in the knees. That's when the growth plates in the joints have too much space for the activity that you're asking it to do. And you can't lift weights to help a growth plate. It has to actually grow along with, and then you can add. So with that caveat in mind, you can, with the information we've talked about today, you can identify where a kid is in his basically his biological age and match up his throwing workloads and his bat swinging workloads with what he needs to do in the weight room. Now, guys that are built like you and me were a little on the stocky side. I never had any issues training with heavier weights because I was built like a beer keg anyway. And you being a hockey guy, you're working on your legs.
Yeah, I'm built
Your
like a
legs,
pear.
Yeah, your legs were strong even before you started doing heavier weights with your legs. So again, when I say personally adapting, you can't cookie cut a strength training program or a workout program for the whole pitching staff the same way. There are certain rules you have to follow by, but each kid is unique unto himself. So with that caveat, and again, there's enough information and instruction with Mustard and all the other things we're doing where you can personalize a workout for each one of your athletes.
No, that's awesome. And you brought up, matching the workload with throwing with the weight room. Is that something that, can be kind of a foundation for a coach that's trying to figure out how much their pitcher should lift, how much, when, what days? It's like, is it, yeah, I threw a lot today, so I'm going to do a heavier lift today or tomorrow, or I threw a little bit, so I'm going to do a lighter, like you're kind of just matching what work.
Yeah, you can see the common sense involved. If you're a starting pitcher and you threw 105 pitches, what day is this? Oh, say this was Monday. Well, you threw 105 pitches, you're in muscle failure, and you know you're not going to get in the game for at least 4 days, maybe 5 days. You can dial up some heavier weight on day one, go further into the deficit so you super compensate. You're always mixing and matching in that volume, load, frequency, intensity, and duration with the eye on being able to recover in 2 days. On the major league level and working back to little league, an athlete who can recover from muscle failure in 2 days rather than 3, it's a 2-game swing on the big league pitcher's record. Instead of being 10-10, he's 12-8. And 12-8 in the big leagues right now is $1 million a month. So recovery is huge.
No, that's I think just having that framework can help so many people, because a lot of people just don't know. I think the biggest question is, how much of stuff do I do, right?
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
so much stuff on everywhere of things you can do, right? But it's like, at what point do I cut it off, and how much of stuff do I
Exactly.
do, and when
And
do I do it?
everybody wants bigger, faster, stronger. But there is diminishing returns for the amount of heavy free weights that you lift versus the price you pay on your joints.
Mm-hmm,
Do the lift and add the throw or the swing in on top of it.
mm-hmm,
So, I hear big leaguers that are squatting 600 pounds, and that is really cool if you're just a weight trainer.
mm-hmm,
But the stress that that puts on low back and knees and hips for the velocity that you generate by being able to lift 600 pounds it doesn't add up. There's a risk reward and there's diminishing returns with lifting too heavy too much. And just for thought processes, you should always try to stay around, if you're a pitcher or a quarterback, you should always try to stay around body weight and use repetitions to give you your volume. That will be easier on your joints, especially your low back, your elbow, and your shoulder. I
mm-hmm.
love the weight room, but I don't want pitchers training like Olympic lifters. And they can be really proud of themselves that they can bench 350 and squat 600, but it's not necessarily useful for
Mm-hmm.
them in the long term to be able to do that and keep a healthy arm and throw too.
That's a great point. You talk about, staying healthy, right, in the weight room. Sometimes there's, the more mature pitcher, maybe he's been in the bigs for 7 years, he's been successful, and, his priority in the off season or in season is to, stay healthy and to be able to maintain performance and to not have setbacks. And then there's also the person that, maybe they're a junior in high school and they're close, but they're not quite where they want to be able to get the offer. How does their training look different from a throwing standpoint, like in terms of the amount of high intensity throwing or volume, that type of stuff?
Well, break this up in your thinking. There's off season, preseason, and in season. And for a veteran major league pitcher, his off season is building enough strength that during preseason he can taper to where he can maintain the whole competitive season at 70% of the volumes that he trained to in the off season. Let me say that again. These guys long term have figured out that if they get this amount of volume lifted with everything from body work to dumbbells, elastic cords, machines, free weights, where you put that volume of lifting in the body every week, to when preseason starts, when we go to spring training, they're going to start tapering so that when the actual season starts, they'll be able to maintain everything they built in the off season at 70% of that volume and be healthy the whole rest of the year. And then they start again at the end of the year. For the junior in high school, it's not quite sure which way it's going to go. Just be careful about trying to do football lifts and bulk lifts when your body hasn't matured enough for the joints to handle that kind of activity with a free weight. So you can lift heavy, but you don't want to max out to a point where you're really proud of your volume, but it's hurting your shoulder or your knee.
Right. And on the baseball field, how does that look from like a throwing standpoint?
You'll see, we recommend throwing every day and long toss as far as you can throw perfectly. We literally believe that you have to throw every day. I would have, if I was talking to young pitchers right now, they would throw every day of their life. They would only throw on the mound 9 to 10 months a year. So they have to, basically recover from the mound. But throwing on flat ground, long tosses as far as you can throw perfectly. You're going to work on eyes level, glove in, go GFF, eyes level, glove in front, drag the back foot. You're going to throw for accuracy when you're playing catch, just like you do when you're pitching. And we use the frame, and forgive me for boring you, but maybe some of the kids haven't heard this. You want to throw small to miss small. And I've seen you playing with Justin Courtney, where you guys, what is it, 2 points if he hits you in the face, 1 point for the body, whatever that might be. You're always competing at something. But if you throw small, you'll miss small. And I've seen pitchers actually ask their catcher to put a quarter size black dot in their brown glove, or a quarter size silver dot in their black glove, and you throw to the quarter to hit the glove. Don't just throw for the plate, throw for the small part of the plate. And that will really help you long term as a pitcher as well as an everyday player.
Right. That's amazing. There's a question here that got sent in, and it asks how to improve internal rotation. And I think it's a little, there's a couple different angles we can go from it, right? Because is it improving the degrees of internal rotation, like mobility, versus internal rotation strength or speed? Can you kind of just go over?
That's a great question. And whoever called this, because there's a big discussion about this going on throughout baseball right now. There's something called GERD, which is glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. And what happens to long-term pitchers is that the more they pitch, the longer they pitch, their external rotation always gets bigger and sometimes stronger, but always has more flexibility on the back. It's the internal rotation where they lose the degrees and the arm speed. And you actually measure by going to the non-throwing arm and looking for the amount of degrees that are achieved from external rotation to internal rotation. And the throwing arm has to have that same degree. It may have a different starting and stopping point, but it has to have the same degrees. Now, if there's no problem with that, the way that you build internal rotation is by holding the heavy. You're going to take your heavy balls and externally and internally rotate. That will create strength and a greater range of motion because of the extra weight, heavier than a 5-ounce ball. But to have internal rotation increase in speed, you have to throw light. So you rotate externally and you hang on to heavy and you throw the light. And with that, not only will you maintain the GERD ratios, but even though your arm has a tendency to want to slow down as your career progresses, by throwing the light, your nervous system will allow your arm to go faster in internal rotation. Let me put a knot on that. If you want to increase the strength through the range of motion and the range of motion itself, especially with internal rotation, you teach that with heavy. If you want to have speed with internal rotation, you teach that with light for the nervous system. So in season or preparing to fix internal rotation, that's hold the heavy, throw the light.
A great answer. I think you answered all three angles of that. We'll leave it, I think, right there. I don't see any more questions in here. Tom, that was an absolute pleasure. I learned a ton. I hope everyone else did. And always love talking shop.
Made that really easy for me. I think we touched on some things that we've never really talked about. And we hang on to these, and you can cut them up and paste them up.
Yeah.
Because there were a few things that I've never talked about on the screen before. So kudos to you.
Awesome. Well, kudos to you for giving good answers. Yeah, this will be a good one. I'm excited to go back and watch this. And I was trying to take some notes, but I didn't want to make it look like I wasn't watching. So I'll be going back and taking plenty of notes once this gets put up. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us in the kitchen, and we'll see you next time. And Tom, I'll see you in a couple of weeks in Dallas at ABCA.
Awesome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Talk to you later.